The grand library was a cathedral of hushed whispers and the scent of aging parchment, a place where time seemed to slow down to the rhythm of turning pages. In the furthest corner, tucked away behind the towering shelves of forgotten classical music scores, sat Aria. Once a world-renowned pianist whose fingers had danced across ivory keys in the most prestigious halls, her world had been silenced by a traumatic accident that had left her physically unable to speak. For Aria, the silence wasn't just a lack of sound. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that had separated her from her friends, her career, and her sense of self. She spent her days tracing the ink on old scores, her soul screaming in a language that no one could hear. Her father, a titan of the music industry, had tried to buy her recovery with the finest doctors, but he couldn't bridge the gap of her emotional isolation. Aria felt like a broken instrument, stored away in a dusty corner, waiting for a melody that would never come again, until the day the silence was broken by the most unexpected sound. Oliver was a man who lived a life of quiet service, his days spent pushing heavy carts of books, and his nights spent writing stories that he feared no one would ever read. A single father who had lost his wife years ago, his entire universe revolved around his 6-year-old daughter, Lily. He had taken the job at the library because it was a sanctuary for a man who loved words but struggled to find his own place in the world. While the wealthy patrons of the library looked past the man in the gray uniform, Oliver saw everything. He noticed the young woman who sat in the shadows of the music wing, her eyes filled with a grief so profound it mirrored his own. He didn't know her history or her famous name. He only saw a fellow traveler lost in a forest of silence. He began to leave small, anonymous gifts on her table, a perfectly sharpened pencil, a sprig of lavender, or a bookmark with a quote about the courage to begin again, never asking for thanks, just wanting her to know she wasn't alone. Lily was a child of bright colors and boundless empathy, and she didn't understand the invisible boundaries that adults built around themselves. One rainy afternoon, she escaped her father's side and wandered into the music wing, finding Aria staring blankly at a sheet of staff paper. Without hesitation, Lily climbed into the chair next to her and placed a small, worn-out harmonica on the table. "My daddy says music is just feelings that have learned to fly," the little girl whispered, her eyes wide with an innocent clarity. Aria felt a surge of emotion that she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, someone wasn't looking at her with pity or clinical interest. Lily was looking at her as a friend. Encouraged by the child's presence, Aria's fingers began to move, not on a piano, but on the paper, scratching out the first notes of a melody that had been trapped inside her. It was a raw, haunting tune, a song for the silent, and it was the first time Aria had spoken since the world went quiet. Oliver watched from the end of the aisle, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and awe as he saw the connection between his daughter and the mysterious woman. He realized then that Aria didn't need a cure. She needed a reason to communicate again. Over the following weeks, the three of them formed an unlikely bond. Oliver would bring Aria rare manuscripts he found in the archives, and in return, Aria would use her musical genius to help Oliver structure the rhythm of his prose. They communicated through handwritten notes and the universal language of shared smiles. Aria rediscovered the joy of creation, realizing that her voice wasn't lost. It had simply moved from her throat to her pen. Mark's presence provided the stability she had lacked, his hard-working nature and humble integrity acting as a grounding force. He was a man who had nothing but gave everything, and his selfless kindness was the key that finally unlocked the door to Aria's recovery. The turning point arrived when Aria's father made a surprise visit to the library to bring her home for another round of sterile medical appointments. He was prepared to find his daughter in her usual state of despondency, but instead, he found her laughing silently at a drawing Lily had made, with Oliver standing nearby, discussing a new composition. The cold, corporate man was stunned to see the life returning to his daughter's face. He watched as Aria handed him a thick stack of musical scores, a masterpiece she had written during her time in the library. She then handed him a note, her handwriting firm and clear. "This man and his daughter gave me back my soul. He is a writer of great talent, and I want him to have the chance he deserves." Her father, moved by the undeniable change in his daughter and the sheer quality of the music she had produced, realized that he had been trying to fix Aria with money, while Oliver had fixed her with humanity. The transformation of their lives was as dramatic as a crescendo in a symphony. Aria's father, a man of immense influence, didn't just thank Oliver. He recognized the raw talent in his writing. He used his connections to get Oliver's debut novel published, a story about a widower and his daughter finding hope in a library, which quickly became a global sensation. Oliver moved from the basement of the library to a beautiful home where Lily had her own library and a garden to play in. He was no longer a man in a gray uniform. He was a celebrated author who used his platform to advocate for mental health and the importance of the arts. Aria, though she still spoke with her hands and her music, returned to the stage as a composer. Her Library Symphony became a legendary piece of music, performed in the very halls where she once played, and it was dedicated to the man and the little girl who had found her in the shadows. Aria and Oliver remained inseparable, their lives woven together by the thread of a shared struggle. They established a foundation that placed musical instruments and books in the most neglected parts of the world, ensuring that no one else would ever have to suffer in silence. Oliver never forgot the weight of the books he used to carry, and he often returned to the library to sit in the same corner where he first met Aria, reminding himself that the greatest stories are often the ones we live. Lily grew up to be a musician herself, playing the flute with a joy that reminded everyone of the little girl in the yellow raincoat, who wasn't afraid to talk to a stranger. They had proven that wealth and status are nothing compared to the power of a single act of kindness, and that the most beautiful music is often born from the deepest silence. In the final scene, Aria and Oliver are standing on the stage of a grand concert hall after a premiere. The audience is standing, their applause a thunderous roar that fills the space. Aria looks at Oliver, her eyes shining with a light that no accident could ever dim. She reaches out and takes his hand, and for a moment, the world goes quiet again, but it is a peaceful, beautiful silence. Beside them, Lily is waving to the crowd, her harmonica tucked into her pocket like a lucky charm. Aria doesn't need to speak to tell Oliver that she loves the life they have built. The music they created together says it all. As the curtain falls, they walk off the stage together, not as a celebrity and a worker, but as two souls who found their way home. They had turned a tragedy into a masterpiece, proving that as long as there is someone willing to listen, no voice is ever truly lost.